Hello everyone, this is Enrico Sartori. Today we are going to talk about flute methods, in particular Italian flute methods that can be used when teaching to intermediate students or flute students that they learn flute for a semester or two. Most of my former students, after they graduate, they find a teaching job, either in a primary, secondary school settings or at a private music company. So once a year we organize a seminar about teaching in which I ask them to make a multi-year plan of teaching, generally 3 to 4 years. And during this plan the student has to go from level 0, so he doesn't know how to play flute at all, to a level in which he can enter a bachelor program measuring in flute. So while it is quite clear what method to use at the beginning, and TREVOR Wise Beginner's Book for Flute, it's kind of the favorite book for this. There is always a little bit of confusion on what to do next, because most exercise books are too hard and they don't quite develop the technique. They mostly focus on one specific aspect. So today we are going to talk about those books, and the aim of this short class is to show what is out there. Then it depends on the single teacher how to use these materials. So before starting, let's have a few words about the TREVOR Wise, a beginner's book for the flute. This is a fantastic method for both kids and adults because it's very interesting. So even from the lesson 1, where you only learn how to play 3 notes, Sol, La, Si, you already have some music that you can play and you can have fun with. So that's why this method is very popular. Is popular in England, of course, is popular in the United States. In Italy, there is also an Italian version, and there is also a Chinese version. Generally comes with 2 books. There is a part 1 and part 2. There is also a piano part that you can purchase. There are some CDs with the accompaniments. So it's probably one of the best materials out there for beginners. Now, what do you do after this TREVOR Wise? You still need to develop your own technique, and probably your work will go into 2 directions. Develop your technique, your digital technique, and at the same time develop your sound. So there are many exercises you can do, but which kind of textbook can we use? So let me show you a few. In China, there is this book. I call it the yellow book. It's divided into levels from 1 to 10. And each unit is kind of progressive. You see, this is level 1. You have an F major scale. Then you have some exercises. And later on you have some music that you can play. It's not necessarily taken from the flute repertoire. It's could be any classical music arranged for flute. Then you see level 2 is a little bit more complex. Then you can get to level 3. Level 4, you always have the same format. You have a scale, you have an arpeggio, you have some exercises, and then you have some repertoire that you can perform. in China there are also exams that the kids can give after you finish one level. And it will get you a small certificate that you can use during your education to get extra point at your school for extracurricular activities. The idea of this book is also very similar to the one of the Suzuki method. Also, the Suzuki method for flute is divided into different books with different levels. But today I want to talk about specific methods. So some books that they were written for intermediate students. And they are taken from what I called the Italian school. So I'm going to talk a lot about Italian flute players and composer. One of the best books that I recommend is this one by Giuseppe Gariboldi. It's called 30 Easy and Progressive Studies for Flute. So now progressive is a word that I like at this level because it means that there is some progress in the skill of the student. If you take a close look to this exercise, you see that the number 1 is fairly straightforward with only quarter notes being the fastest note, and the range is quite limited. As long as you go forward, then you see that the speed of the exercises increase. So you have 8 notes. Later on you will have 16 notes. And then there are different techniques. You have the legato, the kind of the long staccato, the short staccato. All the accent, different type of accents. When Gariboldi wrote this method, I also have a facsimile of the first edition. He also introduced all the breath marks, just to get an idea about the phrases. So not only they get faster, but also the range gets bigger. So you're going to play more high notes and more low notes, and then some trills are introduced here at exercise number 14. And later on you have the staccato, you have the double tonguing, you have a lot of things. So if you just take a look at the first and the last exercise, you start from this, and at the end of the book you arrive to this level. So it's quite an interesting path. Now this Giuseppe Gariboldi 30 Easy and Progressive Studies for Flute, it's available all over the world. There are several Italian editions. You can find it in the United States. Just go on Amazon.com. This is the book. This is my edition that I wrote for my young students here in China. And soon my edition will be available through the website JW Pepper, probably this fall, around November. So, this is one Giuseppe Gariboldi method. Another one is the 20 Studies Opus 132. It's kind of a similar concept to this. If we stay in Italy, there is another book called the 58 Esercizi per flauto, 58 exercise for flute. The edition I have at home is edited by Bourbon, but there are many other editions. So this 58 exercise for flute is a collection of different exercises that Gariboldi wrote during his life, are taken from different methods, different books, but the idea is that, again, these 58 exercises are very progressive. So you start with something like this. And you end up with something like this. There are also other books you can use with your student. Let's take, for example, Ernesto Kohler, another Italian flute player. He wrote his Opus 93, 20 easy, melodic, progressive exercises. So again, the format is a little bit different from the one by Giuseppe Gariboldi, because in here there is a first exercise for the development of your tone. Then there is a scale. After that there are some exercises. There are some arpeggios on the tonic chord, on the dominant chord, and only then it comes the exercise, the etude. This exercise is then followed by a duet. This duet can be played with your teacher or can be played with another student in your class, a more advanced student, for instance. This is also a very interesting book because it develops your technique and your idea for melodic structures as well. Generally, after this exercise, or after you arrive to lesson 6 or 7 that you gain some technical abilities, I generally start the Opus 33, which is another interesting method that Kohler wrote. The Opus 33 is divided into 3 different volumes, and the first one, that contains 15 studies or exercises, is what is called easy studies. And this also can be used for intermediate students, for people who are learning the flute and they are at their second year of learning. So there is volume 1, which will be followed by volume 2 and volume 3. Very difficult. So this is another great idea. Now, Ernesto Kohler is an Italian flute player, but he spent most of his time in Russia, in St. Petersburg. In fact, all his methods are quite popular in Russia. And since Chinese education today, the classical music education, has taken so much from Russia, Ernesto Kohler is very popular also in China. At my university, we use 2 books by Ernesto Kohler. Of course, this is for advanced students. We use the Opus 33, the volume number 3, the difficult one, and then we use the Opus 75. That is something for professional players. But let's go back to our intermediate level. So we talk about Giuseppe Gariboldi, we talk about Ernesto Kohler. There is another Italian author that is very popular in Italy. His name is Luigi Ugues. He wrote La Scuola del Flauto, Opus 51. The flute school in English. This work is divided into 4 volumes of different levels, with the first volume being the easiest. And the specialty about this method is that they are all duets. So the student have to play the top line, and the teacher, or as I said, even an advanced student, can play the bottom line. So they have some little duets. Most of the time, when I was a student in Italy, generally only the top line was played. Very rarely the second line was played. But I think it's a great idea, and I always love to play with the students. So this could be also an interesting method for those teachers who like to get involved. I like to play during my lessons. I don't like to sit and teach. I like to actively doing something. And I always see a very good response from the students, that they really practice at home. They feel very happy to have this music activity together with their teachers. So sometimes I use also the Luigi Ugues method. Now let's move away from Italy. Let's go to Northern Europe. There is a book written by Andersen, which is the Opus 37, 26 Little Capricci, that can also be used for this purpose. As you can see, the first exercise is quite easy and straightforward. Then they get harder, and musical things are getting introduced, such as the trills, the gruppetto. It will tell you how to do the gruppetto. So those are my ideas for intermediate students. As a piece of advice, generally, it's better to focus only on one problem at the time with the students. So if we take any of these exercises, I tend to focus, the focus of this exercise is staccato. The focus is playing faster, making sure your E doesn't have this finger down, your E in the middle finger, in the middle register. I tend, especially at the beginning level, later, yes I do, but for students who are at the second year, generally I focus on developing their technique, or I focus on the sound. I try not to put all these things together. Otherwise, it's too many information. So this exercise, along with another great method, which is the Taffanel and Gobert daily exercises. Probably I'll use the exercise number 1, 2, 4, and 7 for students who are at the second year of their studies. So this studies and the Taffanel and Gobert book is what I use for the development of the digital technique. For the sound, I use many different exercises that can be just playing long notes, or could be playing the Moïse la sonorité, some of the exercises with the rhythm. Again, also with the sound, I make kind of a big difference at the beginning between developing a beautiful sound and doing some exercises for the intonation. Now, what does it mean, a beautiful sound? How can you define beautiful sound? For me, a beautiful sound is something that is very open, has some substance, doesn't have too much air inside, is relaxed, is a sound that can project. It's a sound that is consistent in all the 3 registers, the low, the medium, and the high register. So when I work on the sound, I try to focus on the sound, on making sure the student have a relaxed embouchure and they have a correct way of producing such a rich and full sound. Of course, if a note is completely out of tune, I will correct. But when I work on developing the sound, I try to focus on developing the sound, because when I use the tuner, for many students the goal would be aim for the green light of the tuner. But by doing that, they do all sort of wrong position with their mouth, with their body and everything. So I tend to divide the practice into 2 distinct parts. One, it would be the development of a good sound through long notes. The other part would be the development of a good intonation practice. How I do that? Generally, on the tuner, I play a low sound and I make sure the student can play on top of this low sound the octave, the fifth and the fourth to begin with. And later on I ask them to play a full scale, always with this low pedal note on. This way, not only will develop the correct intonation, but it will develop also the ear of the students. So it will be able to tune easier when it's doing some other activities or when he plays with some other instruments. So, these are pretty much my ideas about teaching students who are at the beginning of their musical journey, students who are at the second year of their flute learning. What are your ideas? What are your comments? Please go ahead and let me know what you think. Bye bye.